Georgie, welcome back to the Balance Theory.
Thank you so much, Erika. Excited to be here.
Likewise, we are both two postpartum mums just trying to get in a 20-minute conversation. We're going to see how this goes. I really just wanted to catch up with you because we've both just gone through something very similar. Our baby girls were born 3 days apart, and I would say that our births both kind of unfolded in a similar way, and you and I were really like counseling each other through it, and I thought it would be very useful to kind of open up and share that with other ladies who might be going through the same thing. So I guess to kick things off, I'd love to know a little bit about, if you can share high level, your sort of birth story, or I guess pregnancy leading into birth.
Yeah. So first of all, also I've got Lacey here on the recording. She is a little bit unsettled, so you may hear some little cries, but she looks like she's getting a bit sleepy.
She's happy.
So I had
mum life.
Literally, this is it. I had placenta previa, so that's basically where the placenta is over the cervix, and I knew this from 20 weeks and had a lot of kind of notice that, you know, if it doesn't move up, I would have to have a C-section. And I got the 35-week scan. It still hadn't moved up. So I was pretty, I guess, ready to get the news of, oh, you have to get a C-section. My first daughter was a natural vaginal birth. So going into my second pregnancy, I just thought that's what I would have. But yeah, so I got that final scan. It still hadn't moved up, and it was really grade 4, they call it. So my doctor even said, you know, there might be a possibility that I'd have to go under general anesthetic because just the placement of it was quite dangerous. So I got that news, and I was logically like, okay, I've been told this, it's fine. It is what it is. But then also I had the news that I had to go on bed rest from 35 weeks because of how dangerous it is with my condition of if you go into spontaneous labor, the baby has a very limited amount of time before it turns not good. And so the plan was always to go on bed rest from 35 weeks. So if I did go into spontaneous labor, they could rush me into, you know, the OR and do the emergency Caesar, just because there's, you know, a window of 45 minutes to an hour before it's detrimental to the baby. And so, you know, I had all this news and I just thought, you know, worst case scenario, they've got to tell you it's fine. I'm all over it. Had, you know, really supportive team, really great doctor. Tim knew, I've known for a long time. I've had time to process. So logically, you know, I was like, it's unfortunate. I've got a high-risk pregnancy, but it is what it is. And yeah, so once I had got the news that I was getting C-section, we had a lot of conversations around it, which I'm sure we'll go into a bit more. But then what kind of unfolded was at 34 weeks, I was at home the week before I was going to go onto bed rest, and I had a big bleed. It was just before I went to sleep, and I definitely knew from the amount of blood that it was, you know, she was going to come, because I just was like, oh, there's no way I'm kind of coming back from this. So I was at home with my husband and my 3-year-old daughter. So we all got in the car. My doctor was there. He did an assessment and basically said, yeah, you're actually in spontaneous labor. You're 3 centimeters dilated, and we need to get you and get her out ASAP because, yeah, things are not good. So that's the really, you know, short recap. And then what unfolded after that was I had to actually go under general. So I didn't even get to receive her. I had to go into general anesthetic. And then because she was only 34 weeks, she had to be in the NICU for 2.5 to 3 weeks, which was a whole other journey, you know, post-birth. So It was a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
But, you know, once she came out, it was just, I was so relieved. And and once she was back from the hospital, I was able to really just, you know, take that breath and be like, okay, we're here, we did it. And
You're on
ever
the other side of
since,
it.
yeah, we're on the other side. And ever since, you know, she's been an angel. And I just feel so grateful because even though the kind of worst case scenario did happen, we're both okay and safe, which if you look at the statistics of that scenario, sometimes, you know, it can go really, really bad. So very grateful that we're both safe and sound and she's healthy in here. I think
And
she's
just
gorgeous.
gorgeous, might I add. Just absolutely beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I know you've like literally been through it. You've gone through so many, I guess, extremes of what can happen during a pregnancy, labor, and sort of post all of that as well. Um, like you kind of brought up, we both had a window of time where we had both imagined and envisioned this natural birth for ourselves. It was my first baby, it was your second. So you'd obviously already experienced something. And I guess naturally, as I would have done as well, you kind of assumed that the second would be something similar. So we both had this window where we were gearing up, wanting a natural, unmedicated, as close to nature as possible birth. That was the quote unquote plan. And then
Yeah.
I had a very different scenario to you, and definitely nowhere near as extreme. But my baby was basically breech. But I was told that at 28 weeks, and they were basically like, don't stress, they can still turn. But if they don't turn, just letting you know it has to be a C-section. And I hadn't even contemplated having a C-section. So you and I sort of started having these conversations. But I do want to admit, I think there was a window of time where we were both like, oh, it could probably still change. Like it might not actually be the scenario. And when you're in that kind of hope, it was very easy to sort of be like, yeah, if it happens, it happens. But then it got to a point, I think we were both pretty far along. I think I was actually 4 weeks ahead of you. Babies were born 3 days apart because you were so early. But we were far enough in that we were both like, okay, we're both definitely having a C-section unless like some miracle happens at this point. I do want to talk about that moment because you and I are both sort of A-type to-do list kind of people. And I feel like in my head, I was like, you can't have a plan with birth, but my plan is to be like as natural as possible, right? And then as all of this sort of unfolded, I was like, well, you really can't have a plan because everything is so unpredictable. But I want to go into the conversations you and I were having about coming to terms with having a C-section. I want to admit something, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on it. I realized, having gone through this and having had to come to terms with having a C-section, that I actually had a lot of judgments around C-sections. And I really don't want to offend anyone listening because I know a lot of people elect for C-sections off the bat. But it really brought to my attention that I held a lot of judgment around it. And that was something I really had to process in order for me to come to acceptance with the fact that it was happening. Do you feel like you had a similar experience?
Absolutely. And it's unconscious, isn't it? Like we don't
Yeah.
want to be judgmental. Mine was the story of, you know, my mum had 4 natural births and she's like a very natural person. All the women around me, the only C-sections I'd ever heard of were emergencies. So like, you know, they had to be done. And of course, an emergency is never going to be like the most beautiful experience. So I definitely realized I had a lot of stigma around a C-section. The fact that it's like, you know, unnatural, it's medical, all those sorts of things. And I think also because with my first birth, I did, you know, hypnobirthing and was really immersed in that world. And they really do kind of paint, you know, C-sections as the worst thing possible. And so definitely unconsciously, I had the exact same story and pretty much the same of like when it was like, no, you have to get a C-section. There's no other options. Yeah, I had to look at it and I really did realize, oh, wow, I've got a lot of stigma. I've got a story around this that I had to unravel and really, first of all, like, I think you're allowed to have your wants and desires. So if you want a natural unmedicated birth, then that's a want. If you want to have a C-section, then that's a beautiful want. So it's allowing yourself to have the wants and desires, but then also understanding the layers of, is that really my story? Is that someone else's story? And then a huge part for me was kind of dealing with almost like a grief, almost like like a grief of the birth that I would have wanted, to have. And, in my scenario, I didn't even get to receive Lacey.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't the first person who held her. I actually didn't get to hold her for 72 hours after.
Wow.
Because of her being in the NICU and needing to be on a machine, an oxygen machine. And that obviously brought up huge emotions and huge feelings. And so I had to really grieve, the birth that I did want to have, while also understanding that the birth we had was still beautiful because it's our story. And I think when you do have to process it's not exactly what I wanted, but it's the only options is you either, sit in, this isn't what I wanted, almost like a victim, like this isn't what I wanted. I'm going to be forever upset about this, or you can, accept it, work through the grief and be like, it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but I can still understand that it was a beautiful thing. How did you feel about it?
Honestly, exactly the same. I'm one of four as well. My mum gave birth to the four of us vaginally. In fact, I was actually breech, but 30 years ago, I don't know, they just used to allow you to deliver naturally breech babies. So I definitely had that story of like, I'm being robbed of an experience I feel like I should have. Like I kind of, it was weird for me because
robbed. That's a great word.
Yeah. Like it wasn't a high risk pregnancy, but it was a high risk labor. So for me, it was weird because like I had such a smooth pregnancy and there was no sort of issues. It was just like, if she's in the wrong position, which just felt like such a like, I don't know, for me, I just felt like I wasn't scared of birth. I wasn't scared to try and deliver without the pain relief and all of that. Like I was really excited to try it. So when I was sort of told you can't just because she's in the wrong position, I don't know, it just felt like I really had been robbed of that experience. And just like you said, the rhetoric and language, because I really am, I don't go to a doctor, I go to a naturopath. I am kind of more in that, as close to nature as possible. C-section for me was like, this is such a medical intervention. And in my head, it just didn't really correlate with, like, I understand, of course, breech is high risk and why they do it. But I just hadn't mentally prepared. But in saying all of this, I have to say I'm so grateful, and I know you are too, because we spoke about it, that we had notice, we had time to process, right? It wasn't a case where we went into labor, we're thinking we're going to have a natural birth, which, I know so many people go through this experience, then it ends up in an emergency C-section. In fact, my experience was so different. We literally picked the date, booked in, I had a full night's sleep, woke up, went in, it was done in like 20 minutes. So it was actually very calm and relaxed, almost like very robotic. Like it was a bit weird in that regard, but we had time to work through all these emotions before it actually happened. And so just because there might be people listening that maybe have gone through the process of having had an emergency, maybe they're pregnant and know they have to have a C-section, or maybe they're just scared of giving birth in general. So I want to talk about some of the voice messages you shared with me, because they really, really did help me about like reframing this whole situation. So I guess there's that point where you're kind of grieving a birth that you realize you can't have, you're feeling robbed. I would say I was sitting in that for like 2 to 3 days, and I think that's totally necessary, right? Like, yes, you might be sitting there feeling like a victim, but it's almost like you have to process, right? But then once that's sort of done and you're like, okay, this is what's happening, can you share some of the reframes you kind of, I'd say, coached me through? Because they really, really did help me.
Well, if you think about anything, I'm going to go broad for a second. If you think about anything, the only reason why we do have, feelings around something is because we give them meanings. So, for us, it was giving the C-section the meaning of it's a medical intervention. It means it's unnatural. There was also probably some like undercurrents that we maybe conscious or unconscious of around, does it mean I'm less of a woman? Does it mean I'm less of a mother? Those sorts of things. And so we have these feelings around it because of the meaning. And so what I do with anything, not just, this scenario was like, reframing it and being like, okay, so in this scenario, if I put the meaning on that it's this negative experience and I didn't get what I want and I got robbed, of course I'm going to feel those, negative emotions. Yeah. So for me personally, it was just putting a positive reframe on, for my thing of like, thank God we have the medical system, because back in the day, I would have just died in childbirth and Lacey probably would have died too. So I know that's a very traumatic thing, but it's like, thank God there is medical intervention because it saved our lives. How amazing that I did have from week 20 to really process this and understand this. And then, with it of being like, thank God I had thank God I've got a baby. Thank God I had a safe delivery. Really just sort of, it's very easy to always pick the negative, to go to the lack, to go to the thing that we didn't get. And so for me, it was just about reframing to all the things I was really grateful for in the whole scenario. Did you do the same?
Yeah, well, that is exactly what you shared with me, and we did speak at length.
Good.
We were talking about how, in another life or another world, like it could have been, if a C-section is the way it was supposed to happen and it happened after 30 hours of hard labor, like, would you have rather that type thing? And I know people go through that. So again, for me, it was coming back to that gratitude of, okay, baby's breech, she might turn, there's like a very, very little % chance. And the Lord knows I did everything, all the positions, all the acupuncture to try and make her move, but she was just super comfy in that spot. But coming back to that, I'm really grateful I've had time to mentally prepare for something that I didn't realize I had so much judgment around. I think for me, it was the story of like, people are like excited to give birth. And I was like, I'm not giving birth. Like, I'm not giving birth. It's actually just like an operation. And that really was like hard for me because I felt like I hadn't worked for it. I wasn't going to work for it, But my sister said something beautiful to me. She said, you carry the baby for 9 to 10 months, then you're its mother its whole life. Birth is this blip in the middle. We put so much emphasis on it, and it is a beautiful experience. Obviously, it's the moment your baby comes to life. But you being a mom, there's so much time around birth that shouldn't dictate, like you said, whether you're worthy enough as a woman, whether your body can do what it's supposed to do. These were sort of the things that were circling in my mind. So I'm really grateful I had time to process and unravel and learn those things about myself before. And also, again, like you said, it was coming back to that gratitude of we live in a time where I don't need to chance it with a high risk delivery. We have an option. So again, that reframing, I was actually pretty surprised, like how all my, I guess, personal development work kind of came to play during this period. I think when you're focusing your personal development on like really yourself and your own goals, you're sort of on this steady stream. But then when you go through life experiences, you kind of get these opportunities to put that into play in other scenarios. Like it might be business, it might be relationships, it might be you going through becoming a mum. You get the chance to really test those skills in new scenarios. So this was sort of one for me that really, really surprised me.
Exactly. Yeah. So true.
Yeah, so I'd say definitely like gratitude and reframing was something that really helped during that time. Another thing I really wanted to ask you about, I remember at the start of the year when I was in Queensland, I was doing some podcasts and we went for a walk, and you were telling me about how this time round for postpartum, you wanted to do things differently. Because with your first pregnancy, you kind of went straight back to work. You'd overcommitted with, different projects you had on. But this pregnancy, you wanted to be really intentional and give yourself space to not have to rush back to work. And I've seen sort of some of that unfolding. You've been sharing a lot on your stories. But I wanted to ask you how you've been feeling about that. Do you feel that you've been fully able to sit in that? Are you feeling a bit guilty or that itch or pull of like, oh, I really want to go back to work, but I said I'm going to be in this intentional space? Like, how are you going with that?
Honestly, I have never felt so much happiness, like contentness, gratitude than I have in my whole entire life than this postpartum season. And I think what comes into play with that is sometimes in life you have to experience the duality of what you don't want to understand what you do want. And for me, in my postpartum journey with my first daughter, Ivy, I think any mum, you don't really understand what becoming a mother is until you become a mum. And so I had this, assumption that I would, just have this baby and then I'd go back to work and I'd want to, stay in my career and I'd want to do all the things. And that is actually exactly what happened. But I guess I didn't really understand the complex of emotions, of the hormones, of the pressure, of the stress, of, what your body goes through, so much depletion. And then just emotionally and in your, in your brain, in your mindset, I guess, becoming a mom. And so I had my daughter and then I did go straight back to work, which is what I definitely wanted at the time. But it resulted in me really struggling. If I'm being very honest, I really struggled connecting with Ivy at the start. It's like connecting with her, I really struggled connecting with my new self. I struggled with, anxiety. I wouldn't say I had postpartum depression, but I did experience a lot of anxiety and a lot of overwhelm and disconnect from self. And to be completely honest, I kind of don't even remember that part of my life. I feel like I've disassociated from it because it was truly, really hard. And then I did a lot of inner work. I worked with, some a couple of people to kind of understand what was happening. And it really was that I just didn't give myself time in the postpartum. I didn't realize how sacred postpartum is. And I didn't give myself time. I didn't kind of have the support network. I didn't have, the resources to really just be in that time. And so after that experience, with, when I got pregnant with Lacey, I was very intentional about working with my team in my two businesses. So I had at least 6 months off. And, I worked with my, he's called a mind body coach, and we did a lot of somatic work and RTT and hypnotherapy and breath work around, letting go of the shame and guilt around, the mother I was to Ivy. And I did a lot of work around it because I had very complex feelings. So anyway, that's the backstory. But yes, with this postpartum, oh my God, I feel like a different person. I've never felt so connected with, Lacey. I've never felt so I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time, if that makes sense. Yeah, and it feels so sacred, so beautiful. But for me personally, it did come with going through the experience of what I don't want. And so what I would say is, if you are currently going through an experience, whether it's the birth, whether it's the postpartum, whether it's the pregnancy, there is something to going through a season where you realize what you don't want and you realize you want different. And I think my biggest realization in that was I wouldn't change a thing. I had to go through that with Ivy. And, it's made me and Ivy's connection so strong. The relationship we have together now is just so beautiful and so incredible. And so, yeah, it was a very interesting transition. And I am I guess I'm only, 10 weeks postpartum, but it just feels the world of a difference, and I feel in no rush to go back to work. Even I've had a few conversations with my brother, who's my business partner, and I'm like, I don't care. You guys do what you want. And he's like,
I ain't coming back.
I ain't coming back. And he's like, who are you? And I'm like, I know, it's crazy. So yeah, I am very proud to say, like, I've very much done exactly what was spoken about. And yeah, I don't feel what I felt with Ivy. I think with Ivy, it wasn't because I didn't want to be, a mom or stay at home. It was I had this underlying pressure to achieve, to, go after the achievements, to go after the goals, to go after the desires. And that's really proving your worth, isn't it? So I think after doing a lot of my self-concept and self-worth work, I just don't, have any of that pull. And don't get me wrong, like I still, wanted to do this with you. I still chat to my team every once in a while, but it comes from this beautiful place of like,
you don't have to.
I don't have to, I want to.
Yeah.
And when you own your own businesses, very different energy. And when you do own your own businesses, it's not like you can just like ignore everyone, but very different energy. And I feel so like, it's so good. I feel so amazing this season.
I feel beautiful. Like you're radiating it, and I can feel it, I can see it, and I'm really happy for you. And I do think there really is something to learn and share. Like, I think a lot of women that listen to both of our podcasts are this A-type, high achieving type women. Yes. And I think we live in a time where, and I don't want to offend anyone by saying this, it's something I'm working through myself, but the quote, like, just being a mum, and I say that in quotations, feels like it's not enough. But now, having gone through the experience myself, I always, even coming into postpartum, I was like, I'm going to prioritize being a mum, but then there'll be a time I get back to other parts of myself. And I do think it's important to have things for yourself. However, what it's really brought to the surface for me is how much mums do. Like, holy shit, they do so much. It is a full-time job in and of itself. And it is it's hard in the sense that it takes a lot from the mother, like it's a lot energetically, but it also gives so much too. And I just think that in this time we live in, where women are expected to be the boss babe, have all the friendships, be fit and healthy, keep the household together, look after your husband, cook, clean, all those things, like, you feel like if you're just focusing on motherhood, it's almost like you're slacking off in other areas. So what I want to say to those women who are feeling that way is give yourself permission to just go into it, because like my girl Mila, she's only 9 weeks old at the time of this recording, 8 and a half, and she's growing so fast that I know that this season is going to be so fleeting that if I don't sit in it, I'm going to regret it. And there will be a day where she is independent and doesn't need me to hold her, and I don't need to attend to her every few hours or watch her all the time, and I'll be able to work, I'll be able to do all the things. Like, that is a season that is always available to me. But I think just giving yourself permission to be where you are is so important. And I honestly feel the same way. I feel I have arrived. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah.
I feel like I've arrived at a place of, it's like this peace and just general like contentment with what I've got in my life. Like, I don't need anything else. I just feel so happy. And I didn't think that that would be in a time where I'm not really tapping into many of the things that I've been doing over the last few years. It's like something has come into my life, motherhood, my daughter, that's like just fulfilled, like it's completed me. I know that sounds really cheesy, and I think that comes with the privilege of just being able to sit in it as well. So I'm grateful that you're also having that experience this time around. And like you said, we go through quote unquote wrong relationships, wrong jobs, wrong careers, because you need to have a point of reference so you know what's right, so you know what you want, because otherwise you're just having an experience, and how are you to know if that's actually what you want if you haven't had something to compare it to?
Totally. And I think also you really need to like give yourself the space. With my first daughter, I overcommitted, my first year having a baby, which now looking back, I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? But yeah, I overcommitted, and I just I never gave myself space. And that's the advice I would give, anyone who is going into postpartum. It's like, yeah, don't worry. You can go back to your job, you can go back to your career, but just give yourself that space, because you don't know what's going to come up. You don't know how you're going to feel. That would definitely be my advice.
100%. And of course, people are in very different circumstances. Some have to go back to work after 4 weeks. Some can take the time off. But I think whatever time you have, just giving yourself that grace and just being present. I always say to my husband, even now we're becoming parents has given another sort of corner to our relationship. It's even being present for 5-10 minutes is enough. It's just being intentional with the moments you do have rather than thinking about everything you don't have, So that would be my 2 cents to any new mums. But Georgie, I think we've been very blessed with half an hour of undisturbed time. I think I can hear Miller waking up, so I might need to wrap this chat up. But thank you so much for opening up about your journey, your experience, both before, giving birth and after. Thank you for being there for me during a time where I was sort of unraveling how I was feeling as well. And I really hope this conversation has helped anybody going through anything similar or motherhood in general. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you want to drop some comments below. But otherwise, thanks again. It's always a pleasure chatting.
Thanks so much, Erika. It definitely is. And yeah, I'm so grateful also to have you through this all. It was very funny how it all, worked out, us giving birth so close together.
I think I literally messaged you
I feel.
Yeah, sorry. I think I messaged you because you're tell me how the C-section experience is, and I was like, oh, hey, the C-section experience is like this. You're like, I've already given birth. I'm like, what?
I know, isn't that funny? Because it's so funny when you told me I'm getting the C-section on this date. I was like, oh my god, that's so soon. And then I gave birth before you.
And then the rest was I'll show you how soon.
So funny. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I loved this convo.
Thank you.